I'm Catherine Mazzone here on behalf of MojoStreaming. And with me, we're so pleased to have wildlife poet A.E.lovell, Anthony. Explain to me a little bit about how you came to, were you always such a lover? Were you always so, I guess, connected to wildlife?
Yeah. I actually look back when I first started writing poems about wildlife about 11 months ago, and came across an old photograph of me when I was about 10. I guess I should have sent it in earlier so you could have it up on the screen, but I'm sitting down on the ground and I have a large turtle on my knees. I have a bearded dragon, a large bearded dragon on my shoulder. And in my hands is quite a large, what we call a blue-tongued skinky or a blue-tongued lizard. And that was my childhood. We lived next to the Australian bush. It was at the edge of the city, but there was a mountain called Mount Cootha. And all the opportunities I got, I was out in the bush, down the creeks, trying to catch fish and crayfish, little crayfish. And my whole childhood was filled with reptiles and fish and birds and obviously cats and dogs and things like that. Actually, when I look back at that too, at the end of school or all during school, particularly when I was in primary school, I was going to be a zoologist. That never happened. And then towards the end of high school, I thought, well, the next best thing, I'll go into forestry. So I went and saw the forestry department, and that didn't happen. Life kind of got in the way, and I took a totally different path for essentially 40 years, more than 40 years. And then suddenly when I started writing 11 months ago, that's when I realized, well, I'm just returning to that passion I had. I've had enough of, doing work that's just designed to get you on in this world. I just wanted to do something that was interesting and important to me. So that's how it all happened. And then, of course, if you start looking at wildlife and you start looking at the news and LinkedIn and all the issues around wildlife and climate change and then extinctions and red lists, that's when it really got me going.
May I ask, you have children and grandchildren, right? You have
Yes.
a family.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like you've instilled that love of wildlife in them from the start?
We have a blended family. I've been married for 32 years and we had 3 children each when we came into the marriage, and now we have 12 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild.
Wow.
All of them are kind to animals when I think about it, because they were raised with dogs and other things passing through the house. So yeah, some more than others, but all of them are kind to animals, and all of them have pets. And my oldest son in particular, his place is like a menagerie. He's got birds and fish and cats and dogs, and did have ducks and all sorts of things. And that's in a unit, would you believe, with a little yard in the back. So yes, I think it has rubbed off, and I think that's good to have that generation, that they'll come through. Certainly, our one daughter out of the 6 children, she is a singer and a teacher, but she's also trained to be a wildlife carer, so she's really into it, that's for sure.
It's pretty profound, what you've been able to do in such a short amount of time, and the poetry that you've been, just what I've seen. I know that they were both very impactful for me and for the others I saw.
Yeah, I guess what's happened is that even though you take a different path, I mean, I did a lot of writing for work, not more sort of technical or work-oriented writing, not creative. But I've always done a little bit of poetry. When I first met my wife, in fact, she's always thought that I had some poetic thing there, but that was all I ever did with regard to poetry. And I sort of got fewer and further between, life sort of moves on. But I guess probably maybe 2 years ago now, or just around the beginning of the pandemic, I read a book talk about, I can't remember the name of the author, but it was about finding your element. And, you know, I had this obsession with 4 elements, and as my writing evolves, I'm going to start talking about four elements, not just the wildlife and that sort of stuff, but have an interest in big history, which has 4 elements as well. And so I looked at this book, and I did all the exercises. You had all these exercises, and in the end, it kept on coming up. It kept on coming up. Kept on coming up. But I should be doing what I'm passionate about, because that's where you get the flow. You just don't get the flow in work that you're not passionate about. You do the motions. You do what you have to do, but you don't sort of get up at 4 a.m. and start doing that like I do sometimes with writing. I get up, suddenly I've got some ideas in my head, and I've got to start writing. So in the end, I think what happened is I just gave up and said, well, the day job has to go. I have to concentrate on what the passion is, and I have to see where that leads. And I've got some good pathways opening up at the moment. I've had one commission, which was for the Earth Agency, which is based in London. Ironically, I'm colorblind, but they commissioned me to do 4 poems on colors. And they worked, you know, they worked. And so I'm actually doing a branding exercise with them at the moment, and looking at the bigger picture about how we can get the word about conservation and endangered wildlife out there into the corporate world, which really is a place that something can be done about it.
It sounds like you're not just pursuing a passion, but you're also trying to, you have a purpose. And you've given us some background. I want to know more about how you want to make an impact with your work.
Yeah, I mean, I started publishing, the first poems I published were on LinkedIn. Then I put some onto other social media later on as I got reasonable reactions to them, and you get a bit of positive feedback. So that's where I started doing it. But you start to notice the trends in what people are talking about when you're on LinkedIn, the kinds of posts and the kinds of people you connect with, and the kind of causes that they put up. And there's all sorts of causes, and there's, you know, save the whales, save the pangolins, save the orangutans, save this, save that. And it can become overwhelming. Save the rhinos, elephants. But I found the niche that I found is that someone puts up a story, and that provokes me into writing something that I hope that I can then share. And then I hope that other people will sort of consider what that issue is. What's the issue that's causing that? You know, whether it's palm oil and orangutans, or poaching with rhinoceros and pangolins in particular. And so I started writing about these particular causes. And early next year, we're actually working on something that will be more formalized, I think, in terms of being able to help, you know, getting more organized in people being able to give to a cause that's close to their hearts. But what I can do is actually just draw attention to it, highlight it, and if people are so moved, they can actually do something about it. So that's where I'm going. Beyond that, quite a few months ago, I wrote a piece that I haven't finished it yet. It's called Sacrosanct, and that's where I'm wanting to go with my poetry, is to get people. You know, you have one set of problems which are caused by another set of problems, which are caused by another set of problems, and you just keep on going to the higher order problems, which is also where you find the higher order solutions. And the reason I don't harm animals is because, you know, I just grew up with the example of my mother being kind. And so I wrote a poem about kindness, which I call Kind-Sided. And so there's a few things that people can put into their own lives, which will help them to get a greater appreciation of, you know, the earth and life for all we know, I mean, there are billions of other planets out there that could have life, but at this stage, we only know of one. We're here, and we don't really have anywhere else to go. And so I try and, with this poem, Sacrosanct, which I will publish when I launch what we're doing next year, I'm trying to get people to sort of understand that the earth is kind of like could be like a sanctuary. It already is a sanctuary for life in a cold universe, perhaps. And if people really understood that we're all in the same sanctuary, sharing the same resources, the same biosphere, then we should really be looking at how we can stay here and keep looking after it. And one way of doing that is to make it sacred. However you interpret sacred, you know, life is sacred, and where life is sacred. And that's really where I want to go. And you know, the people who are really passionate about things like elephants and as I keep mentioning, pangolins, because they worry me. They have the heart for it. You know, they really have. They've sort of brought the whole world into their heart, and that's where the sanctuary is, in their heart. And what I'm saying is, try and push that out to the edge of the biosphere. That's really what I'm trying to achieve.
Well, and that was one of my questions was, do you just write poetry about wildlife? And it sounds like you write poetry about whatever touches you.
Yes. I've written one about sand. And the importance of sand. That's part of big history. Silicon, one of the 4 main elements of the earth. Without silicon, we wouldn't have what we have now. And so we don't even think about it. I'm talking to you because we have silicon. And then you say, well, how did silicon come to be here? And you keep going back, and it's really quite amazing. So all of those things are related. You know, we're all, like, I keep coming back to those 4 elements, but you know, we're all made up of something like 52 elements that have been cooked up in the earth, and you can't really escape it. We're part of nature. We're made up of nature's elements. We are animals, despite the fact that we've got a bigger head than we should in terms of thinking that we're not animals. And we're not. And you know, one of the things I'd like to, I do some poetry that sort of challenges people too, and one thing I want to challenge is why we call ourselves Homo sapiens, when what we've been doing up until now doesn't classify as being wise at all. And how wise is it to keep doing things that are causing problems? So, you know, I try to make people think. But my tagline on LinkedIn is I make people cry while their tears still have potency. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people say, oh my God, I'm in tears after reading this, that, or the other. Mostly females, of course, but I'm sure that there are a few men who didn't want to admit it too. The idea that you get moved by the plight of something, or the callousness of humans, or the unthinking actions of humans. If it makes you cry and those animals are still here, then you can do something about it. That really came from one that really is most upsetting to me. There's an animal, a porpoise, called vaquita in the Gulf of California. There's 10 left in the world. They put millions of dollars into saving them, millions and millions of dollars into saving them. I think even Sea Shepherd was there trying to patrol at one time. But because of the illegal fishing, no one's hunting them, but they're just being caught as bycatch in illegal fishing that's going to China for, you know, Asian medicine that has no effect whatsoever. And it's just the inevitability of them going extinct is just, you know, that makes me cry. And it's just, we just have to stop as much of that as we can, and that's why I write.
I think it's wonderful that you can not only pursue your passion, but also make a difference with it.
Well, you have to know. If you have to know things, if you know something, you can do something. If you don't know, Like if the cheetah goes extinct next year, it's too late to say, well, I didn't know. And there might have been something that can be done, but they're not the only one. I'm moving soon to central Queensland. It's about 700 k's north of Brisbane, where I am now, onto the coast, where I'll find a lot of writing time on nearly vacant beaches, which is great. But up there, there was some limestone caves and a mountain called Mount Etna. And when I lived up there for 10 years, 20 years ago, and the caves in Mount Etna are home to little bats, little bent-wing bats, but there was also breeding caves for something called the ghost bat. When I went up there just recently, I heard that there's only 40 ghost bats left, and they'd abandoned the one cave where they were breeding because of the mining that went on the other side of the mountain. Because they were limestone caves, people needed concrete, cement. So they blasted the caves, and some of them stayed there luckily, and the environmentalists eventually got them to stop. And you know, that's what happens if you get enough people acting. Then you know, if those companies feel the heat, and their shareholders in particular feel the heat, then it's amazing what can be done. And if I have some small part in drawing people's attention to that and get something happening, well then that's a good passion to pursue.
Yeah. I have a few more that are not mine, but I mean, we talked about how you've been a writer. Were you writing poetry when you were younger?
No. I think I wrote one poem when I was studying at university. When I met my wife, I did write some poetry.
Right, I remember that.
And but nothing else outside of that. I wasn't moved by anything at that particular time. You know, when you get married and you've got kids, you have kids, and then you double the size of your family, and you raise kids, and then grandkids come along. Your life just gets so full and so busy. But I'm 62 now, and just about to head up to somewhere where I feel really at home and much more in the natural environment, which leads me back to your very first question. That I came to the park because I don't like being indoors. During daylight. I prefer to be outside somewhere, and in the city is not that pleasant. I prefer to be out in nature, and that's the way it's always been. So we're moving to a much smaller area, and with plenty of wild areas around, and still plenty of wildlife, which is very nice.
So you wouldn't have to make that trip that you made to get to that park? You wouldn't have to make the trip?
No, I'll be 700 k's north of here. I'll just walk down the beach. If I ever get another gig with you, I'll just go down the beach and we'll have a talk.
Yeah.
In fact, down the beach there, someone has made I've got photographs of it. Someone has made a little. It's not really a shelter, but they've taken all the long driftwood and made like a little. You can't really call it a shelter because it's open. You can see through it, but it's a little enclosure. I think that would make a good office.
I think you're right. I think you should look into it at least. I want to ask what your other passions are. What else you got?
That's interesting because, at the moment, with normal work and then this outside of normal work hours, things are fairly full. I keep fit. I'm interested in keeping fit because I still think I've got my real work to do now after a whole lifetime of doing other things. I now think I really have some stuff that I have to do, so I want to stay fit. There'll be plenty of beach walking and swimming and exercising, but also when I'm walking in the morning, especially early mornings, that's when I get a lot of inspiration. And thank goodness for modern technology. If I had to use a notebook when I'm walking, it wouldn't be that that useful. But I get inspiration when I walk and just spend time in nature. Yesterday I went to another park in a different area of the river here, and they, I just sat by the river and finished a couple of poems, and someone made a post while I was there, and it was happens to be about Elle magazine getting out of fur, and so just on the spot while I was having my coffee, I wrote a piece. Sometimes I get it just comes in one go.
Mhm.
I wrote a piece and published it, and then I moved to another area of the park and I finished a piece on an elephant that's been stuck in an African elephant in Delhi Zoo. It's been there for 24 years, 15 years alone, and there's some young people, youth for animals in India who are trying to get him sent to a sanctuary.
Yeah.
So I've written I wrote one poem for him. I wrote the second one, and I'm writing a third one for him a bit later on, just to give them a push, because, the passion of youth is something that I wish I'd have understood when I was young. The passion and energy. That's the thing. I've got the passion, but the energy is and the time.
Well, if you don't mind my asking, what was your day job?
Well, previous to what I'm doing now, which is really just nondescript, I really don't like it, and it's just to earn a bit of money. It's a caretaker job. It was just a gap filler. Before that, I was involved in a business that supplied into facilities management, but environmental products, particularly to do with stopping indoor flooding. And before that, I worked in local government in economic development. And that was what I did mostly. And it was there that I did a lot of writing about regional development and economic development and things like that.
Your 1 million project. I want to know about that.
In 2019, the IPBES, and I still can't remember what that actually means, International Panel on something or other, put out a report. It got a lot of coverage at the time, and it said that there were 1 million species at risk of human activity, so climate change,
Right.
Pollution, plastics, you name it, all the things that we do that are causing problems on Earth. They're the things that are placing 1 million species at risk. Now, I thought about that, and I thought, well, that number is just so overwhelming. I want to break it. I want to try and explain it to people what it actually means, because I was one of the first series I started writing was called the Tribe Endangered, and I started writing about endangered animals. So an Aldabran giant tortoise, and orangutan, and Sumatran rhinoceros, a little armadillo. I think I got up to about 7 or 8 of them in that series. I realised that I would be writing that series for the rest of my life, just on the International Union of Conservation. Their red list for endangered and critically endangered species is so long that I've got a lifetime of work in that. And then this other report came in and said up to 1 million species that are at risk. Now, that's not just animal species, that's plants and probably fungi and whatever else. But it's, 1 million is a number that people don't really understand. I mean, maybe millionaires do, I don't. So I started to break it down to try and do that. And I've written a few pieces about how big 1 million is. And then I came up with the idea of, well, what if I was to do a walk? Not in one go. I'm not talking about one go. I'm talking about over a year or so. And if I was to place 1 endangered species to every meter, like every long step, how long would I have to walk? And the answer, when you come to look at it, is 1,000 kilometers. With 1 animal or 1 endangered species every meter. Now, people can then say, well, where I live, 1,000 kilometers is to work from where I am here. That's nearly to Cairns in Queensland. That's a large part of the Queensland coastline. So I'm just looking for different ways of explaining that it's a huge number. It's a very big number, and the only way we can turn it back is to have very big solutions. So they have to be global solutions, and that's what COP26 was supposed to be doing. But it's amazing what you can do when you're a paid lobbyist in terms of getting things watered down from the fossil fuel industry. And I wrote about that too. So industries that blatantly and flagrantly continue to do what they're doing, or whatever justification, you know, to me they're fair game, and I will write about them too, because what we're coming into now is a path in the road, which is in one of the poems I think I wrote yesterday. And you know, there's the right side and the wrong side of history. And very soon we have to make a choice whether you're going to be on the right side of history or the wrong side of history. And the fossil fuel industry is on the wrong side. And your last interview was with John yesterday, or the day before, from South Africa. They've got their issue over there with the deep sea floor mining in you know, biodiverse ocean. We've got one here up the coast of Western Australia that's just been approved. Pretty much exactly the same thing, but with gas, deep sea mining for gas, a huge gas project right in the middle of, you know, humpback whale migratory routes and whale sharks and you name it. And it's just wrong. But you know, those big companies, they have a long-term plan to phase down or phase whatever, as long as they don't say phase out. But they just have to speed it up, and we have to make sure that they are feeling the heat. And so I will write about animals, but I also write about issues that are causing the animals to end up on those endangered lists and in that group of the 1 million. Mm. So I set up a little community which I hope will grow, called the 1 million community, which is kind of like a separate social media thing, but just with people, just with poetry or artistic or other information about conservation and animals and nature and that sort of thing, without all the noise of LinkedIn and Facebook and all the others.
That's good. There's a lot of noise out there, but sometimes, you know, in the noise we can find gems like your work. So it's not all noise, I guess, right?
No, you still have to be out there. But it's nice to have, you know, places like MojoStreaming or others that are being set up now where you can actually just go and just be in your element. Although, you know, unfortunately, when you do get in your element, you find out there's the wonderful side, and then there's the potential tragic side, you know, in terms of, you know, the Greek tragedy where it's caused by humans causing their own downfall, but taking everything with them at the same time. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I write about that too.
Well, we definitely want to have you back when you write about more things. And I didn't mention that you were a contributor to MojoStreaming, but you are a contributor. And of course, we appreciate that as well.
Yeah, well, I appreciate MojoStreaming a lot, because it was actually, when I first started writing, I didn't have a tagline. Cami was the first person to respond to one of my poems, and she called me a wildlife poet. She actually coined the phrase for me, and I went on and put endangered wildlife poet, because otherwise you know, there's a lot of work to be done in at that end. But yeah, definitely MojoStreaming has a place in my evolution. Yeah. And I've, you know, posted a few of my pieces there, and I need to post a few more, I guess.
Well, yeah, we'd love to see more of your work, of course. And for folks who do want to see more of your work, I hope you'll give us a way to do that. Stay tuned, of course. Yes. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you, Anthony, that you think is important, or that I kind of just glazed over, you want to delve into?
Yeah, no, I think we've got the gist of it. You know, the inspiration. Well, that's the other thing too. On that walk that I plan to do down the coastline, starting. Well, I've done pieces of it already, but starting up in my end and working my way down, I want to engage with the local communities as well, and find out who's doing what, particularly the unsung heroes, the animal carers who are out there in all those local areas. And as you know, we had lots of climate change issues with major fires in Australia in early 2020. And I just want to engage with them, but I also want to encourage people to get out there and start following their passion in terms of writing, poetry, art, whatever it is. Just if you enjoy nature and you want to keep it, then engage. Engage your own creative core, and get out there and start making a noise, start making your mark. Every voice helps. I noticed that I say that I'm trying to give a voice to the endangered species, but I know that there's also the voice for Asian elephants, and there's lots of organisations that are trying to give a voice. So we need to all join our voices and get something really, really happening. But as I keep coming back, if you don't know, you just can't do anything about it. And if you're so caught up in the day to day, then things will just be lost before you had a chance to do something about it. And so yes, we need to stay awake and vigilant and do what we can.
And we can be louder together, right?
Exactly right.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining me. And I do look forward to our next meeting. If we don't have a reason to connect before that for an interview, I hope you will schedule one for the prime purpose of showing off your new beachfront digs. Okay. All right.
I might just do that.
Yeah, you should.
Do that.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Catherine.